Can they hear us online?
Should be.
Okay, so thank you everyone, for joining us today. This is the second LPC meeting for the local planning committee for the Near Forward process. Apologize for the rain, hopefully no one got caught in it. With that, Mayor, do you want to just give a quick welcome? You know.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome and looking forward to, we are moving forward on a lot of things, so I'm looking forward to it, so.
Sure, well, thank you. And then with that.
Just stalling for Joe.
It's kind of started. Watch your step. Yes. All right, so as Joe is getting seated, we do have Laura and Brooke who are on the LPC. Laura wasn't able to join us in our first meeting. Brooke is new to the LPC, so welcome. If you both would like just to give a brief overview about yourself, so Laura, if you'd like to start.
Sure, I'm a resident of Dobbs Ferry for the purpose of this committee, but I work in economic development professionally and have been involved in this process previously in my work, wearing my work hat. And I'm also on the Local Development Corporation for Dobbs Ferry, and I'm also on the board of the Dobbs Ferry Schools Foundation.
I'm a Dobbs Ferry resident for the last 10 years, and I'm also the president of the school board. So I wanted to be on to share the schools.
Great, thank you. And then I do want to note that Laura Danforth is on with us virtually. Laura, if you just want to wave or say hi, so we know that you can hear us.
Hi, folks. Sorry, I'm on a,
Would we be able to increase the volume? Just in case. Okay, so with that. So here's the agenda for the meeting. You also have it in your packet in front of you. So it's gonna be jam-packed of information, but there'll be opportunities for everyone to chime in, so not as boring as the first one. So no offense. So we're gonna start off as usual, the LPC code of conduct, the New York Forward timeline. Let's see where we're at in that process. We're gonna give you an update in regards to the public engagement. We're gonna talk through the vision and goals for the process. We're gonna then provide an overview of the strong qualities for Near Forward projects. So we're gonna show you some projects that have been awarded in the past and other rounds of New York Forward projects. We're gonna talk through Project Match, the evaluation criteria, a reminder about the call for projects. We'll then allow time for public comment, and then we're gonna wrap it up with our next steps. So with that, I'll hand it over to Susan to talk through the code of conduct.
So at each meeting, I'll be giving you all a reminder of the LPC code of conduct, and I'll literally read this slide and then ask for anybody to make any disclosures or refusals. Each local planning committee member is reminded of their obligation to disclose potential conflicts of interest with respect to projects that may be discussed at today's meeting. If you have a potential conflict of interest regarding a project you believe will be discussed during the meeting, please disclose it now and recuse yourself from any discussion or vote on that project. For example, you may state that you or a family member have a financial interest in a project, or you are on the board or organization proposing a project. You and the LPC members need to make a disclosure to the committee. As expected, there are no projects being discussed yet, so we don't really expect a disclosure or anything to happen at this point, but I will remind you each time. I have received codes of conduct from most of you, but a couple of you, I will email you if I do not have it and ask for you to submit.
All right. So with that, the Near Forward timeline. So as you could see, in June, we were at our second LPC meeting. We did also have our first public workshop earlier in the month. And you could see here, we have a few more meetings following the process later on, kind of resuming again in August and then going out through September and October for those LPC meetings. And then while that is all happening, the call for projects is going on right now, which we'll talk about. Public engagement opportunities are going to continue throughout this process. And then when you look at the lower half about the deliverables, the vision and goals, we have that now drafted, which we're going to share in a bit. We're working on the downtown profile assessment again, which is that existing conditions narrative. So we're working on that, which we plan to share with you all prior to the LPC meeting 3 in August. And then later on, when the call for projects closes and we get into project development with you all, that's when we're gonna be starting to work towards that strategic investment plan. With that final plan, meaning that slate of projects will be voted on in October. And then all of that is gonna be submitted in the strategic investment plan in December to the state. Regards to public engagement. What have we done so far? So in June 3rd, we had our first public workshop, which I know a few of you attended. Then last week, we had on June 18th, so last Wednesday, we had our business roundtable. We had our open call for project informational session and office hours. And then we also had some downtown business flyering occur. Thanks to Ed and Lizzie, Jessica, were walking around in the heat of last week, going business to business, which was great. And then what is to come in just the meantime, so in July 10th and July 21st, we're gonna have those virtual office hours for the call for projects. So one less opportunity for potential project sponsors to meet with us individually, ask any questions that they might have before they end up submitting their projects for the close of it on the 31st. So just a brief overview. I know there's a lot to read on the slide. So public workshop 1, and then the corresponding online survey that we had. We had 43 attendees, and that does not include the 7 LPC members that joined us. So great attendance. And then in addition to the in-person, we received 28 online surveys. So that's great. The key themes that really emerged from everything was that there was a desire for the downtown to have a welcoming and charming atmosphere with diverse restaurants and retail options and improved streetscaping. So I think we've been hearing that now. Create a more pedestrian-friendly environment through increased sidewalks, more wayfinding signage, and better connections between the downtown and the waterfront and the train station. Desire for a live music and performing arts venue with particular interest in reopening the theater on Cedar Street. And then interest in enhanced public spaces where members of the community could gather, including maybe existing parks within the village. And so at the actual public workshop, and then also the online survey followed the outline of the workshop itself, we had 4 stations. The first station was just about the process and the open call for projects, so it was more informational. For station 2, we had the vision and goals station. So the question that we had asked you all at the LPC meeting 1, we then posed that to the community as well. And that was to create, how do you want to create your future of the downtown? So what do you see for the vision of the downtown? And folks really focus on a vibrant, inclusive downtown with a strong aesthetic appeal and creating a welcoming and historically connected atmosphere for residents and visitors. For station 3, the question was, what's missing in downtown? So here was a sticker dot exercise. We put in some prompts. People were also able to fill it in. And the top 3 suggestions were reopening the Dobbs Ferry Theater, installing public art, and also mixed use development and affordable housing. And then lastly, we had a mapping exercise where we had 3 different maps and you were able to put sticky notes and write your comments on the maps directly. And what came out of that, and this was really particular to opportunities and constraints, consistent design aesthetic throughout the downtown, additional and enhanced communal gathering spaces, and improving the pedestrian experience as a whole. So I don't think there's anything really new. Any thoughts about this? I know this is the first time you're
Well, you're
hearing
right. I think
feedback.
we've been hearing this for years, pretty
Yeah.
much. So I'll see right on the point. Yeah.
Okay. That's what we figured too, and it's also what we heard from you all too, at that first LPC meeting too, so it's nothing really new, nothing new really jumped out. So I do want to make note that we are preparing a synthesis that's going to be posted to the project website by the end of this week. That synthesis is going to summarize all of the results that we received from the public workshop, the business roundtable, and well, mostly just those 2 for the most part. And so we will share that with you all once it's posted, so you can have access to it and you can review it too. And you're going to see all the raw comments if you want to peruse that. But we're going to be providing a little more detail in that synthesis or in regards to the information that I just shared. So as I mentioned, we had that business roundtable last Wednesday. And so the purpose of the business roundtable was to have business owners and members of the public sit at the table with us. And we wanted them to join us for a conversation to allow for the project team to learn more about the business community in the downtown. So we started with a conversation with a brief summary highlighting what has the village learned and the project team learned through all the previous interviews and specifically the planning process that was conducted in advance of the downtown improvement grant. We then had asked them, is there anything missing from our overview? And we wanted to be conscious of the fact that a lot of the business owners have already gone through substantial outreach as part of like the village's initiative, especially for the downtown improvement grant. So we didn't want to burden them with asking the same question, rather we wanted to hear from them, really what improvements is needed in the downtown or what would make it a more vibrant business community. And so with that, you could see on the slide some improved suggestions that had come out of the conversation. Public amenities, a digital marketing campaign promoting local businesses, a promotional map of local businesses, design regulations and best practice guidelines, again, cater to those small businesses, supporting the improvements of facades and streetscaping, the creation of an active crosswalk. Abbey Road came up, maybe painting the crosswalk to look like that up by Cedar Street. Historical signage or digital kiosks that celebrate local heritage, maybe like a walking path and you could learn about the history of Dobbs Ferry. And even just having more events to bring in more people to the downtown to then be spending money at the local businesses. So these were some of the key takeaways that really came out of the Business Roundtable. And the idea is that for you all to really consider this as we start to see projects come in. So thinking about what the business owners had to say and how the projects that are hopefully really addressing some of these concerns. Also, as I mentioned, a summary of our conversation is going to be included in that synthesis, as well as the downtown profile assessment. We will be incorporating what we learned in there as well, which again, you're going to have to review in advance of LPC meeting 30. Any thoughts on this?
The only thought is that it's interesting they talk about the facade. We had a grant.
Have a grant.
We have a grant for facades and
Yeah.
nobody's taking us up on it.
Yeah.
3 people.
Yeah, we have 3 people that have done it. We just changed, the one thing they talked about, as I was there, was the matching and the reimbursement part is difficult for them because to front the money or to match the money is, you know, it's money that they don't have on a regular day-to-day basis. So they were expressing how they wished it was just rented to them and they could just use it, which we explained it's not part of how it works, but we also told them we're switching that downtown improvement grant to be 75-25, so they have to contribute 25% of the total cost, still up to 5,000. But that seemed to make some of them more interested, and so we've since just gotten that updated. And now we'll push that back out and see if pick it up. Hopefully they will.
Yeah, a lot of the business owners, once they did find out about the match increase, they seemed more interested in it. So hopefully that does promote a lot more interest in that program. So something to consider, something to think about as we move forward. Just lastly, in regards to the engagement that we've been doing, so we did have that call for projects informational session and office hours last week. We had about 20 attendees attend. We did start with an in-depth overview of how to appropriately respond to each of the questions in the project form. And then you can see here on the slide, these are screenshots of the slides that we had in the presentation. So you can see we had like bulleted points as to how you should answer specific pages or specific questions on each page of the form. We spelled it out, we broke it out. And then following that presentation style, we were able to then have a Q&A with folks, but then we broke down into more intimate settings. So we were able to have one-on-one with the project sponsors. So it was really interesting. We heard a good amount of interest in folks wanting to put projects forward. So that's exciting to hear from that private side and the even non-for-profit side. So they now have some time to consider what we had talked about, take that feedback and either put it into their project form, tweak their projects, whatever it might be, as they now have the rest of the month or the rest of July to get that project sponsor or that project form in. So it was a good conversation and we're looking forward to see what projects come out of it. So any questions before we continue? Okay, so I'm gonna hand it over to Lizzie and she's gonna talk through the demographic snapshot.
Awesome. So, hi all. It's good to see you guys again. Following up on our first LPC meeting, I will be presenting on some of the demographic information that was collected from our socioeconomic consultant, Kevin Dworka, anyone was at the business roundtable or the open call for projects, he was here last week, but, yeah, so he has, shared some further information. Yeah, so this slide should look familiar, as this was the demographic information we shared at the first LPC meeting. And if you recall, there were some questions, so the demographic data point that is highlighted, which was in regards to the increase in population of children in the census tract. So following that meeting and those comments that were brought up, we went back and had Kevin, our consultant, look further into this. And we even received a copy of Dobbs Ferry's school district's demographic study, thank you, Brooke, in which Kevin was able to review that study, said against that census data that he had collected. So based on the data from this demographic study, the enrollment in Dobbs Ferry School District has been consistent over recent years, with the total enrollment being high during the 2024-2025 school year. And it was actually higher than it was in the 2015 to 2016 school year. So this steady enrollment combined with the increase in children just really shows that there's a connection between the census figures and also the demographic study.
So the bottom line is there is an increased population of children.
Of children, yes. So there's an increased population of children, as well as the enrollment in Dobbs Ferry School District has been steady. It is important to note that the demographic analysis did predict that the district's enrollment may fall in upcoming years due to the outward migration of children. But the study does acknowledge that it's not exactly clear what the cause of this anticipated migration would be, and only that it's likely to occur due to the patterns of households leaving the village.
We are seeing a decline in this coming year, like the current year, so we are seeing that, yeah.
So, Andrew.
The increase in children, is that attributable to any particular developments or, like are buildings going up that have more 3 bedrooms or?
That's a good question. We don't necessarily know that information particularly, but I mean, never well could be a contributing factor to it. If there has been new development within the downtown area recently.
There has, but not.
Yeah. Alright, so we can also we can see if there's any more information that we can find about this and see if we can incorporate that into the downtown profile too. Just continue looking into this and understanding why it is what it is.
Okay, so, yeah, further, in this meeting, we prepared, Kevin had prepared, some information regarding the housing and economic context. As this information will allow, us to understand what the current makeup of the downtown is in regards to housing and the overall business climate. And this information is important to consider when we review projects that come in through the call for projects. So all the information here is relevant for the census tract. Yeah, so the findings were, that the housing inventory, the number of housing units increased by 5%, rate of change higher than for the overall village, which was 3%, and slightly lower than the county, which was, had a housing inventory change of 6%. Additionally, the housing type, 2/3 of the total number of units are located within multifamily buildings. So that's considered residential buildings with at least 2 housing units. And for the village and county, only half of the total units are multifamily. So we are seeing in this census tract, that there is a higher number of multifamily buildings.
When you say this is statistics for the downtown only. But when you
Yes.
compare it to the village and the county, you're talking about everything.
Yes, yeah. So in the previous slide, we had the census tract up.
Yeah, it just as a reminder, it is covering the downtown. It does kind of extend a little beyond the downtown, so near Port Calgary area to the north and the
Yeah.
south a bit, but generally, when we do talk about it, we are referring to the downtown.
And then finally, was information, or not finally, but was information regarding the housing market conditions. So based on the most available census data from 2023, 6.7% of the housing units in the census tract, and 5.4% of the housing units in the village in general, are vacant. And yeah, so then the final point is about housing cost burden. So, housing cost burden, the census data indicates that the percentage of housing cost burden renters in the census tract fell from 62% in 2013 to 50% in 2023, so a decline for the housing cost burden for renters, but we did see an increase in the housing cost burden for homeowners with mortgages, which increased in that same time period from 37% to 47%. So, to
Can
really.
you define what housing cost burden means?
Yeah, so, housing cost burden, would be defined as, I believe I'm gonna talk about this, oh, sorry. Housing cost burden would be relative to, compared to how much income you bring in, how much of that is going towards, your payments, whether that be your mortgage or your monthly rent. So just relative to how much, a household makes versus how much a household has to spend for the cost of living.
So the 50% is 50% of what they make,
Yes, so that'd be,
so that's still a burden, because I think.
No, they're saying 50% of all the renters in
Of all-
Dobbs
got it,
Ferry
okay.
are cost burden renters.
And
it used to be 60. So it's going down, or went down
For renters, but not
for renters,
Right.
but mortgages went up.
So generally speaking, as we were saying, for homeowners, 47% of the people are paying more than a third of their income towards their mortgage.
yeah.
Housing costs.
Yeah,
It's a high number.
Yeah.
Right, went down, but it needed to. It's 50.
No, we're talking about even the mortgages.
No, I know,
Considered a
I'm
lot?
sorry, for renters.
Standard.
I think that's pretty,
What?
I
I
think
think
it's
that
right.
it's a great.
Did you say what?
I asked if the 5% vacancy was considered a lot, a
Yeah.
little standard.
I think, I mean, it does sound low. I think it's also relative to just the number of units that are in the downtown, but it does seem low.
Sounds about, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's usually 4 to 6. is-
Average in a good way, yeah.
Yeah.
When I do pro formas, it's usually around 5%.
Is there any information on whether the cost burden change is due solely to housing prices or whether it's also attributable to household incomes?
yeah, so, in respect to median income, we have noted that there has been an increase in median income within the, census tract, where it's currently 146,000, so, this can be attributed to why the housing cost burden declined for renters. But it doesn't directly explain why the housing cost burden for homeowners was increased.
Is it possible that the cost of housing is outpacing the cost of wage growth?
Yes, yeah.
Or it could also be attributed to just the housing stock, the number of houses that are actually out on the market. So the demand for them also drives up the cost, so there could be a few factors that does contribute to it.
Okay, and then. Yeah, so, next we have some data points in regards to the economic context for the village. So the first is in regards to total jobs. So over the past 2 decades, the total number of jobs in the village of Dobbs Ferry has risen from 32%, which was 4,674 jobs in 2002 to 6,171 jobs in 2022.
It's gotta be Rivertown,
Right,
gotta be Rivertown Square.
I don't know, it's a lot of jobs right there.
It's more than just servers in the theater.
Yeah.
Maybe the hospital. Nursing home.
Yeah, and also to add to that, in regards to the number of Dobbs Ferry residents being employed, we did find that 4,900 residents of Dobbs Ferry are employed, whether within the village or outside the village, but that's how many people, are employed in terms of residents. And then the next is the residential location of workers. So with that, only 8% of those working in Dobbs Ferry live in Dobbs Ferry. Almost 23% of village workers reside in New York City, while another 14% live in Yonkers. Additionally, about sales tax revenue, the amount of sales tax revenue collected by the village has steadily risen from 1.8 million in 2017 to 3.5 million in 2023. And no decline in sales tax revenue occurred during the pandemic. Finally, we have some data about commercial vacancies. Just to note that this source for the information on commercial vacancies came from the study completed for the Downtown Improvement Grant. So the business community has had longstanding concerns about the vacant commercial storefronts. However, the total number of vacant storefronts based on this study, this recently completed inventory, is less than 10 commercial spaces vacant. Finally, if you look to the right, on the pie chart, we also analyze the employment sectors within Dobbs Ferry. So you'll see that the sector with the most jobs is education, which accounts for 46%. Then we have healthcare, which is 26%. Then hospitality, which is 9%, and then a tie between services and retail, which both are at 4%.
What's the total number of commercial spaces?
That is a question that we will have to get back to you on.
I think 90 something.
But I think that the thing that feels misleading about only 10 vacant is that there's a lot that aren't vacant that are just not storefronts. They're like, businesses or service or not open to the public.
And this
So
is
that-
just in the downtown?
And so then it feels when you're walking like there's more vacant because they're not open to you, because they're, the photo studio that's never open, tax services, architects, stuff like that.
Yeah. So
Stuff like that.
anybody can come
Sell some soda.
I'll take that one.
Alright, so as we mentioned before, all this information, again, these are the key findings for housing and economics, and then also the the demographic data points that we pulled last meeting. All this is gonna be put into that downtown profile assessment, so you'll learn more and you can read more about our findings in that report later or next month, I'll say. So with that, we're gonna just keep moving along.
125.
So, next we'll discuss.
Say that again,
the-
so everybody could hear that.
125 locations
For 125.
that we tracked.
Okay.
And that's commercial specifically, does that break down to retail or?
Just total locations on Cedar
Oh,
Lane and
okay.
also Chestnut.
So that would be 10%, less than 10% of are vacant, which, I don't know, it seems good to me.
Okay, so next we will discuss the draft vision and goals for the Dobbs Ferry New York Forward. So if you recall, this is the original vision statement from the application. It was pretty lengthy and it didn't necessarily provide an illustrative view of what the village intends to do to revitalize the downtown. The ideas here are strong, and they include enhancing connectivity between the train station and the downtown, increasing housing opportunity, increasing community spaces, and revitalizing the business community within the village. So we had a great start. And from this original vision statement and taking the input and feedback received from the activities that we held at LPC meeting 1, so the input that we received from you all, and also the input we received from the public workshop, we refined the vision and it reads as such. Downtown Dobbs Ferry will be a welcoming and walkable destination, home to a diverse range of residential and commercial and cultural offerings, vibrant open spaces, and inviting pedestrian experience, linking the Metro North Station to the downtown. By building on the downtown's core of attractive and renowned restaurants, redevelopment opportunities, high potential for walkability, and multimodal connections to the larger region, there is no limit to what Dobbs Ferry downtown can and will become. So on that, do you all have any thoughts, about this vision statement? Is it missing anything?
I just kind of want to reiterate like why we go through this, like the vision statement is going to be one of the things that helps guide project sponsors in developing their projects to make sure it's aligning with what the LPC and the community has said they want their downtown to be. But it's, it's one of these criteria that as you're looking at projects, you want to come back to the vision and goals. And either making sure that it's aligning with that, or offering suggestions to project sponsors, here's a way to help us make sure that we are achieving this vision or this project contributes to that.
So any thought, I know this is the first time you're seeing it, just based off of looking at it here, any tweaks to it? Do you think it's good to go? Is this the vision that we can use moving forward? Do you still want time to like maybe think about it, get back to us?
I'm praising that it seems fine, it's good, it seems accurate.
I
Yeah,
guess
you're good at this stuff.
I would say, I think maybe open spaces, but also like open spaces, you think of parks but what about other spaces that aren't necessarily like, so maybe like open and or community spaces or something like that to include that in there as well.
Okay.
Or even just vibrant communities.
Or vibrant community spaces, right? Yeah.
Okay.
But we can revisit this at any time, right? We can come back next, in August and say, hey, I've had 2 months to think about this.
Ideally, we would like to have this, ideally, we would like to have this finalized before the call for projects closes. Because we want project sponsors to have an understanding of what the vision their project should be kind of oriented towards. So we could give you like a week or two at most. But ideally, we would like to have this finalized sooner rather than later, again, so that we could then populate our the project website and also the forms so project sponsors are again aware what that vision is.
Because to Vinnie's point, it looks great.
Right, it's the first chapter, of
Right.
course.
Think about it, yeah.
Totally.
One suggestion or food for thought,
Mhm.
maybe something about the waterfront as well.
Okay. Okay, so we will then, we can update the one edit where that you provided, and then we'll circulate this all to you for your review. Either tomorrow or Friday, and then it'll give you a week or so to take a look at it, provide any other feedback that you have, and we'll just do this via an email chain, so. No need to regroup or like via a call like this or a meeting, we'll just do it via email. Sounds good?
Yeah.
Thank you. Of course. Okay. Okay.
With that, in order to achieve the vision, another key component that we've drafted is a set of goals, which set of goals with the goal of guiding the village to achieve the vision. To do this, we similarly took the input and feedback from LPC meeting 1 and the public workshop and have come forth with this set of draft goals. So similar to the vision, we'll also send these around. And if you have comments or such, then we'll have time to incorporate those in. Also, if you have anything to say today, say it, if it jumps out. So yeah, I'll go through them. The first is to diversify downtown's commercial offerings. So this would be to promote a vibrant and resilient downtown economy by fostering a diverse mix of retail and dining, while supporting the growth of small businesses, attracting a variety of tenants, and transforming spaces to accommodate evolving commercial needs. The next is to enhance the pedestrian experience. So enhance the pedestrian environment by prioritizing accessibility, safety, and enjoyment of the downtown through the implementation of a comprehensive approach to create a seamless pedestrian experience that connects the downtown core to the Metro North Station and the Hudson River waterfront. Next would be to enliven the downtown through creative placemaking, activate the downtown's open spaces and public realm through creative placemaking to foster a vibrant, welcoming environment that enhances the cultural and aesthetic appeal of the downtown, while also fostering a sense of identity, in turn attracting both residents and visitors. And then finally, increase housing opportunities, foster a more inclusive downtown by supporting redevelopment that results in the creation and expansion of mixed income housing opportunities to create a more diverse and equitable community. So similar to what Susan had said before, these will be things that, project sponsors will align their potential projects with. And to make sure that, projects that are evaluated by the LPC align with what the goals and vision is for the process. So.
Place.
Placemaking is essentially identity, so through the rubric, usually exercise.
Having signals in the built environment that signal to the user that this is a place that people are welcome, that you want to say, that says that this is downtown Dobbsbury. And so that could be art, that could be having you like signage that's specific for this, it could be having a public space like a plaza or park, that you're like, this is Dobbsbury. And so that's kind of, placemaking takes a lot of different forms. The one we commonly really see in this program is a lot of branding and murals and public art and so forth. But it varies really depending on the community. That's kind of the beauty of it.
Yeah, that all sounds great.
It's plain language.
Yeah, that's great.
It's meant to be fungible, that unlocks the unique aspects of the business.
So we could tell them that it's something, I agree, placemaking, if for the common person who doesn't do this daily, they might not know, so we can definitely take a stab at coming up with something that might be a little more.
Something we should refer to the appearance of buildings.
I guess
There's aesthetic is, again, a nice Latin word.
Yeah.
Make things look better. It's, when
Typically, the municipality is the project sponsor for these types of projects. However, there are instances where some of these are sponsored And so the project sponsor actually took into consideration the feedback from the LPC, and they lowered their amount, while also lowering it, they then also added in the public benefit, which was doing the pedestrian improvements. So in that case, it was a little, it really was back and forth with the LPC. And when I say with the LPC, we serve as basically like a leader liaison, so all the conversations, the feedback and everything that we have at these meetings for project sponsors, we will then take back and go have those conversations with the sponsors on your behalf. And so we will be taking back any feedback, and this is the opportunity for us to be able to have these conversations with the podcast really to come in and we could vet them and review them and see again, based off of the money that, the total pool that we're looking at, where these projects fit in.
So you're not able to use that for, you should go back and tell them, there was no conflict, except if they kick in.
Exactly, yeah.
Really, really heavy.
And let's see if that works. Oh, that's not gonna work.
Bora, are you able to hear us now? You give a
Yeah, thank you.
thumbs up.
It's much better.
Okay. Yes, you can hear it now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry, apologies for that.
It's okay.
All right, so we do just have a few more examples. So we have two examples left to show you, and bear with me, it's a little delayed now. Okay, so this is a commercial renovation. So this is in the village of Hoosick Falls, the rehabilitation of an existing building. So this project includes the renovation of an old firehouse and adjacent vacant lot into a functional and inviting restaurant with outdoor patio seating. The second floor will be transformed into an event space accommodating 80 to 120 people. So you can see here the before and the after for the images on the right-hand side of the screen. The total project cost was $278,000, whereas the total award was $209,000. Can you speak to, were they fully awarded?
So they received the full $209,000, but this was 75% of the total project cost. So this they followed the standard state match requirements. And we're going to talk about the match requirements for Dobbs Ferry.
All right. And then the last one that we have is a public art project, and this was in Peekskill. So the project proposed a series of public art installations, which included sculptures, murals, panels, and banners throughout the downtown Peekskill. And so you could see the total project cost was approximately $681,000, and then they were awarded $500,000. And this was a public project.
This was a nonprofit project.
This was a nonprofit project. Look at that. So there you could see an array of projects that have been awarded throughout the New York Forward, but then also the DRI to date. So something just to consider as to what we can expect to see come in through the call for projects. So next, I'm going to hand it back over to Lizzie, and we're going to talk through project development.
Hi again. So in regards to that project development, this section will serve as a refresher for you all, because we briefly went over this in LPC meeting 1. So before we get started with what comprises project development, I do just want to note that in the lower right-hand corner, which I don't think you can see.
It's blocked here, but
anyways, the presentation will be shared on the website afterwards. So if you would like to go back, I do want to note that the lower right-hand corner, you'll find the applicable guidebook section. So if you want to refer to the guidebook following this presentation, that will be your key for that. And then also, the PowerPoint will be posted to the website after the meeting. So to start, what are eligible project types? First, we have public improvement projects such as streetscaping and some others. Next, we have new development or redevelopment of existing downtown buildings. Next, we have a small project fund, which is for projects under $75,000 in total cost. Finally, we have branding and marketing. And it's important to know for branding and marketing that this type of project should be for overall branding and marketing of a downtown, and it cannot be for individual businesses or other entities. Okay, and then, also as a refresher, here are the, ineligible project types and activities. So first is the planning activities, which is all proposed projects must be used to implement the strategic investment plan. So that means that, funds cannot be used for planning activities such as a comprehensive plan, which you guys are also undergoing, or other planning activities that do not result in shovel-ready projects. Next is operations and maintenance. The New York Forward funds are to be used for projects rather than administrative costs, such as staff salaries or utility costs. Next, we have pre-award costs. So all reimbursement for the New York Forward will incur for costs after the announcement of the project awards. So reimbursement cannot occur for any kind of costs that happened before the project was awarded. Next, we have property acquisition. So the New York Forward funds cannot be used to obtain property. Property must already be obtained by the property owner. And finally, we have training and other program expenses. So funds cannot be used to cover continuous costs, such as training costs and project expenses. Does have to be costs that are over a finite period of time. And then finally, we have project requirements. So to begin, we have that all projects must be shovel ready in 2 years from the project award. So within 2 years of being awarded New York Forward funds, the projects have to be ready to, get started and begin to be built. Next, we have projects are to be of a minimum scale or size. And so standalone New York Forward projects have a minimum total project cost of $75,000. The project must have sponsor capacity, whether that be from a public, a nonprofit, or private entity. The project must have a source of financing as well as matching and leverage, where private project sponsors are required to contribute a minimum of 25% of the total project costs. And this includes the small project fund that we mentioned before. Next is project sponsor costs. So the project sponsors must have site control of where the proposed project is to occur. And also projects of a certain scale are subject to building decarbonization requirements. And finally, we have projects that will receive reimbursement. And as seen on the box to the right, strong New York Forward projects are catalytic, transformational, able to be implemented in the near term and create synergies between different projects and programs in the downtown, which sums up the points to the left. And then finally, as you saw in LPC meeting 1, here's our New York Forward boundary. So all proposed projects are to be located within the New York Forward boundary. So now I'll pass it back up to Christy to talk about Project Match.
Any question on any of that? Nothing too new at this point, but we're just, again, setting the stage for what projects should be looking like for those that are going to come through the call for projects. All right, so as Susan alluded to, we're going to talk about the actual project match itself. So for private projects, there is a minimum requirement match of 25% for the New York Forward. Match, as of today, there are no requirements for the nonprofit or public projects. So this is the time for the LPC to weigh in. Should the minimum 25% match for private New York Forward projects be raised? If so, to what percentage? Should there be a match for nonprofit projects? Again, if so, what would that percentage be? And then the same for public projects. Should there be a match requirement for public projects?
So let's take just private projects first.
Yeah.
And so the state requirement is 25%. LPCs do not have the discretion to go below that, but they can increase that if they would like to put a higher match on for private for-profit projects.
So this is just to stretch the money.
Yeah, or require private sponsors to
be putting
a little bit more skin into the game, so to speak.
And one is to all. We can't like say, well, this project can get 25 and this one has to be 30. That has to be one price for everybody, right?
I think for the sake of transparency, I think we should have a standard match.
Sure is.
I don't walk out there a lot.
Yeah.
Oh.
Curious what another village is on the river did, and how they get.
I think they had kept, or actually, I don't know. I think they had kept with the requirement. I don't think they had changed it. Or
I'm
there
trying to
was,
even think, I don't believe
I
we
don't
had
think
a
there was a
requirement
requirement
that
at
year,
that point.
actually.
I don't think there was one because it was the first round. So I don't think there was a requirement at that point.
Exactly.
There was no requirement and there was also no minimum project amount.
Right.
So here at this, for a standalone project, they have to be at least $75,000. Whereas there, they did not.
See, is it more successful, more money put in, more skin in the game, or find projects take longer because they have paper financing? So what's your?
I mean, I could speak to the,
It's a fair question.
yeah, I mean, I could speak to the first part being that Susan's from the state sitting right here. The state definitely looks more, it's favored in the eyes of the state for a project that does put in a match. Or if they're putting in beyond the match. The state wants to see that they have the money that they could put towards the project and in addition to what they are requesting from the New York Forward. So it does look favored upon for projects. I don't know if you want to speak to the
Yeah.
latter half.
And I mean, I think for private for-profit projects, like it is, you know, this should not be the majority of the funding for private for-profit projects to occur. But, you know, we recognize that like communities have different needs and there's, you know, a range of capability within various communities. And so we have a standard match, but that's why we leave it up to the LPC to kind of frame it for what's more appropriate for their community. I can speak to what the decision that NIAC made. They had their meeting a couple of weeks ago and they did kind of a tiered system. They said if a private project sponsor comes in and asks for 750,000 or under, it's a minimum 25% match. 750 and over, it's a minimum 35% match.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Frame exercise, would you view this as a competition for developers doing the project here as opposed to elsewhere? Is there any idea
Like, I'm trying to make sure I understand the question. Like, you know, if this is the incentive to do the same project here versus going down to Hastings on Hudson, I don't know that I've ever seen it that way. It's like that draw to come to Dobbs Ferry instead of going to a nearby village. I have not seen that type of project come through.
I think it also kind of serves more as an incentive to do the work here because once you're put into that strategic investment plan, whether you're a project that gets on the slate of projects or if you're a project that might fall off, but is still kind of like follows along, not for funding, but just to be carried along and implement and put into that strategic investment plan, your name is now in front of the state and you are essentially vetted through an 8-month planning process. So now you're going to be above other applicants that are coming in for other grant opportunities because you are already vetted. So it kind of puts
maybe above.
You may be above, depending on the project, but you may be above because you were already vetted through a long, transparent process with public engagement and a lot of elements that do look favorable for these types of projects.
I think their logic was if they're going to be coming and asking for a large amount, then like they should be putting a little bit, we should at minimum require them to put a little bit more into it. If they're asking for a smaller amount, if it's a $200,000 project. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Makes sense. It does, because they're gonna be making money, it's profit making, so they're gonna, over time, they're gonna be, recouping.
So some of these sites for downtown area, is that put in by one business or a group of businesses or how does that work? Is that like?
We've seen it in the past, either in multiple ways. We have seen it where individual business owners do come forward with wanting to do facade improvements. Facade improvements on their own does not make a strong project. We want to see what could bring in actual improvement and benefits to the downtown, whether it's for public benefit or just the economy in general. So if it is just a street, if it is just a facade, we always try to get to see if there's more that could come out of it. But otherwise, we have seen, as Susan mentioned before, that larger program that could be facilitated by the village, where it's a smaller grant program, similar to the downtown improvement grant that you have currently, where then multiple storefronts can then also apply for the funding that way.
They apply then to the village to get some of the money that is set aside for that?
Yeah, so it would be, So the village would be the sponsor for a smaller pool of money. And then if the village is awarded that money, they then, it's basically like a mini little grant program in and of itself. So similar to the downtown improvement grant, there'll now be a separate pool of money for then applicants to have to come in. They'll have to fill out a project form or an application of sorts. The village will then determine who receives the money from that pool of money. With those, there are match requirements as well.
Some of the businesses do not own the building.
Yes.
How does that work?
So ideally, we would like the property owners to be the ones that are putting forward the requests. However, business owners can also do that as long as they provide documentation indicating that they got approval from the building owner.
What point in our process are we allowing or not allowing the small projects?
So the way that we were considering it based off of conversations with the core team and the LPC is that let's see if there are any projects that do come in below that $75,000 threshold, because ideally that would warrant whether or not, and it's going to show the demand if there is a demand for a small project fund. Otherwise, I mean, it's also to the discretion of the LPC if they feel as though it makes sense. But ideally, hearing the downtown improvement grant for some reason isn't working, does it make sense for the village to put this forward? So that's why we want to see first if there's the demand for it.
If a person owns a property along one of the streets, can they put their own facade for properties, or is it per property?
Usually it's per property. I don't know that there would be anything restricting multiple properties, but I would say that again, a facade improvement on its own is not necessarily adding activity to downtown. So it's maybe not meeting all of the goals of the process and the state as well. Is a standalone project. Under the small project fund, it is an eligible activity.
Question, I mean, I'm not on the board, but just a suggestion, if the idea is that the board can adjust the match levels. So within the umbrella of we go forward, if the board not wanting to basically fix or adjust the match levels based on which of the goals or the aspects it more preferably wants, right? So if the board wanted affordable housing more than the other things that we were forward for, then couldn't we not say, okay, we'll increase them for the affordable housing project. Okay, that means I'm on
Maybe even do towards some type of identified, like, it's an overall goal, right? So like, we want to be like, affordable housing more important to us than facades. Even that, I think is tricky.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'll just say my experience, because I just finished the DRI, which is $10 million, and this was in the city, so a little bit different, but we didn't have a minimum. We had, I think it was in the end, like 20-something projects that came forward for asking for a total of $17 million, and then ultimately the $10 million was awarded, actually 9.7.
Yeah.
Consultant, as they know, different here, but we didn't have a minimum because we just wanted to see the types of projects that came in, and there were some projects that came in that were ranked, like, not that they're ranked in order, but that were like, we saw that were met the goals that I don't know if I should use the word ranked, but that the committee felt were higher priority projects, and then there were some that had really high match, or it was like a small amount of the total project, but we didn't see them as priority projects. So I would say that we shouldn't just like say match, because we want to see we want to have flexibility when we see what the projects are. What are you saying?
So the 25% is the standard. Did you all not have that in Long Island City? Interesting.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Match. There was no like requirement. 25%, and then we didn't discuss like, should we make it more? Should we? It was just like,
that's interesting.
It has to be a match if it's private, and then we just got that. Yeah.
So you're suggesting.
Yeah, because I think then you just see what the projects are, and you can discuss the merit of the project versus, because there may be a reason why like this project would require, less of a match, but it's more of a high priority.
If the village had like a standard look that it was going for, some kind of, something that the village trustee would control. And then individuals wanted to apply for the grant and it followed the look that they were having. With that, because you said like facade by itself wouldn't do anything.
Mhm.
But if they were going for a, a village-wide look, the streets that we're talking about, would that, help them to be able to get those grants? If there was some kind of standard that the village said, if you will do this, this, and this, and then, it will help us to present our charity as with its own
Mm.
brand.
Well, so all projects, regardless of the New York Forward, are still subject to Dobbs Ferry, like code requirements, zoning code, building code, and permits and approvals. So I mean, ideally, they're still moving forward with the design guidelines that are set forward already in the village code for commercial storefronts. So to your point, I mean, we would hope regardless, they are still putting forward their best foot to creating and contributing to the aesthetics of the downtown and the vision that the village has set forward. But again, it kind of goes to, is it adding activity to the downtown beyond just increasing the storefront? We do understand that having a nicer looking storefront does make it more enticing for folks to come in, which is like playing devil's advocate in a way, but ideally we do want more activity to come out of the project. So what are our thoughts? I know I think we have two ideas. One, let's leave it as it is, or do we maybe come up with like a tiered approach similar to what NIAC did? Do we just raise it to 35% or 30%? What are our thoughts? Again, this information is going to inform project sponsors before they submit their project.
If you do it 25%, say, oh, this person's gonna kick in more money, so let's say someone says we're asking for, we're looking for $100,000, we're gonna kick in 40%. And we can decide that that's a better finance project. We can weigh that as one of the reasons why we accept.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and we're gonna talk.
Right. We're gonna kick in 50%.
Right, still have to close how much they're putting in.
Right. Yeah, and
Right, okay, yeah,
Right.
that's some point, great point, yeah.
In your experience, has the ability to contribute more to a project aligned with the likelihood the project will get completed? Does it just reflect something about the
Gosh, didn't think about this.
yeah, I would say
generally, yes.
yeah.
But the reason I'm thinking about this is because, I mean, New York Forward is now 3 years old. Like, we haven't necessarily had a lot of these smaller scale projects that have come through. So like, I can speak to like the large development projects. Like, yeah, I think like that makes a difference, but it's also just a totally different scale. Whereas, you're thinking about smaller communities, like we don't have the track record necessarily for me to say one way or the other.
What happens if somebody folds in the middle of it? So you give them the money, and then after a year or so, they can't finance their project.
Eric, do you want to take that one on the private side? I can take it if you want. Okay. So for for-profit projects, reimbursement only happens at the end, at the completion of a project.
Okay.
And we approved more than the 4.5 million.
Yeah, right.
In case something like that happens, and then there's another that could be funded that we've already approved. That can then get.
Right, yep, we're gonna be putting forward a slate of $6 to $8 million.
Waiting list.
Kind of. Contingency.
Say, yeah, people okay with 25%.
Yeah, so it sounds like the idea right now is either 25%, leave it as is, or increase it, and then we could determine what that increase percentage is. Or it's I guess it's either the tiered system or leaving it at the 25% match for private projects.
You would think that if somebody was doing something above $700,000, that they would have more money to kick in. But at the same time,
you would hope. Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
Yep.
So
Setting a tiered system just makes it complicated for them to figure out.
Yeah.
There's, you know, if we can suggest it for the ones that we wanted.
Yeah.
Well, I think those people were trying to sell themselves too. So
Mhm.
if they came in and we will between this project and that project, and then they said, I'll kick it another $25,000. And we're like,
Right, and that,
Well, can we?
unfortunately, I do the negotiating, how lucky, but, yeah.
Can you suggest that? Or do they have to come up with their own that?
No, so as I mentioned before, with that example project, all the feedback that you have, so especially if the LPC feels strongly like they seem to be asking for a little bit too much, they would be better suited if they lower their request. We will then go to the sponsor on the LPC's behalf to have that conversation with them. And again, as Lindsay mentioned before, and what the mayor was bringing up about the leveraging. So the idea of bringing in, adding more money to your project, despite the 25% match, showing that they could contribute more, will be favorable. It sounds like generally for the LPC, but then the same thing for the state.
There are also two local gatekeepers, us, and then there's the state.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
you know, the likely ability of a project that's not being able to be funded
Mhm.
won't exist.
Right. And so also for all private projects, we will most likely ask for not always a pro forma, because that could be extensive for the types of projects, but we will ask for not financial records, but a relationship with a bank to understand that they do have a lender. Or for larger projects, we have asked for pro formas in the past to understand really if they can truly fund the project. So we will be doing our due diligence that way as well.
Great that you're doing that. We're a village of 11,000 and half more here.
Yeah, right, right. Okay, so I could do it for you. Okay, so we're gonna take a vote. So we'll take a vote. For those that are in favor of keeping it at the 25 minimum percent or the 25% match with no increase or change to that, raise your hand. Okay, so we do have majority. So that is the plan. So moving forward, for private projects, there will only be a 25% match. Now we're gonna go.
My hand, because I think it doesn't honor well if, for a substantial project, if there isn't at least a third of the money coming in from the sponsor. It's, you know, I wouldn't put any money on that project if there isn't skin in the game at that level, a third at least.
But in the rare cases that happen, we can suggest.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree that then we have conversation, but I just think that's, for me, very minimum,
Isn't that kind of by what you were saying is you can tell them in a way that they're not kicking in really enough for us to feel, even though 25 is the minimum, their project is so much that that's taken away from other projects and it might take their project off the list.
Right. So that is something that when we do start to evaluate projects, we are going to be evaluating projects based off of what their cost is against what their New York Forward request is against what their cost of the project is. And to have an understanding of, is it feasible for them to put this project forward if we do ask for them to reduce their request? So there's gonna be some things that we're gonna think about, and that is something, it really sounds like it's something that all of the LPC generally does feel the same sentiment. So that's something that we're gonna keep in mind as we have these conversations.
Yeah, I mean, trying to think like bank, right?
Yeah.
And we're, you know, in a funny way, we're acting like the, you know, the people that are reviewing loans for the bank.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but you all, I mean, one of the evaluation criteria, that's the next section, is going to be cost effectiveness. Right. That's something that you all will be evaluating among other criteria.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that next too, so you'll understand. And we're gonna talk about the criteria and it's gonna follow us through every meeting moving forward. So it's gonna be something that just keeps coming up. So just to move this along, I know it's important, but just to move it along, because we do have two other posed questions here. The next is, do we see there, should we be adding a match for nonprofit projects?
That's tough.
Yeah.
I guess there's some skin in the game.
Okay.
Especially kind of a push pull, like a lot of the commotion, you wanna make sure nonprofits that are mission oriented get through, but, really is like more important.
But it is reimbursable, so like, even if you are a nonprofit, you have to have some capacity to go fund money. So. Like, I run a nonprofit, we're here for, but we did actually, we could put in something, so. But, I think, you know, it's not like any nonprofit. Because they would have to have site control and they would have to, also be able to fund money.
Could it be a nominal, like a 10%, just sort of a, just a thank you, just a, yes, we, you know, we have some skin in this game kind of thing. Nothing that will,
You get more projects if it's 0, do you get better projects if it's 10?
Do you get more projects? Yes. Yes, you get more projects.
Quality projects if there's a minimum.
So, I mean, again, I'm going to refer to Naya because they just had this conversation. They settled on 5% because what they said is, you know, we want to see that an organization has the capacity to do some fundraising or to raise funds in other ways, and then to be able to operate, you know, their program out of the project, whatever it is, following that. So they wanted to see some nominal amount that it was an organization that had capacity. And for them, you know, 5% as a match was, you know, enough of a signifier of that. I think that, you know, in my experience, I think that nonprofits that, you know, can put forward a little bit of money, it makes it a little bit more viable to move forward in a quicker fashion. Yeah.
What kind of projects have you seen with something on the nonprofit project?
Last year, a nursery school came in, so a Montgomery Nursery School, and they were a non-for-profit, and they were awarded New York Forward funds last year.
And I want to say
What were they doing?
they were expanding their nursery school. They were adding another classroom so that they could, you know, work with another 10 plus students.
Yeah.
And they originally asked for the full amount, I think at $589, and then they ended up being able to put in, I want to say maybe 5 to 10% by the end of the process.
Yeah.
That goes to the goals of what would for the goals of the New York Forward project. Is that more?
So in terms of the nursery school, I think it goes towards helping to provide additional child care options within the community because they were offering, I think, up from 3 and above. And so I think that that's, you know, how it fell in. Yeah.
It also lends to meeting like the New York State goals, like the broader New York State goals, for just accommodating more, I guess, nursery schools and like lower education programs just in the state generally too.
Yeah, we had a lot of nonprofit applications from like arts and cultural institutions. And we also had like my organization, which I don't know, so I was gonna ask this question, in the small project fund, we run as like sort of like a Chamber of Commerce and Business Improvement District, but we had an idea for a small project fund where it would be murals on private sites. So the nonprofit would administer the small project fund rather than the city or.
That's what they did in Peekskill.
Yeah.
Yep. Same thing.
Yeah.
I was going to say something. I lost it.
Another example.
Oh, other examples. I mean, I think arts projects are some of the main ones we get. Theaters, museums, things of that nature are some of the major ones that we get. And I think in both of our experience, like coming in with some funds already secured or like, you know, you have a really good idea or plan for fundraising those funds does help those projects advance more quickly.
Yeah.
I would do what 5%, maybe 10%. That's just my thought. So,
All right. So it does seem like generally everyone is on board with adding a match. Okay. So now the match is, do we want to do 5%, 10%? 25%?
I think 25 is protection.
Like a minimum.
Yes, this is a minimum match. So this is the required match that they had to put forward. Of course, they could add more, but this is the minimum.
I've sat on NISCA and Preservation League. And it really, that represents the capacity of the organization. They don't have that capacity
Right.
Again, it doesn't augur well for the success of the
Project, yeah.
of the
Yeah.
use of the money. So,
That's just another 10% for fundraising in some other way.
Yeah.
can't do that. I mean, we've seen a lot of organizations that have no capacity.
Well, they're gonna front the entire project, they'll get 90% of that, if they only do it.
Mhm.
So we've already elected it and spent it.
Right.
That's a great deal. There's a lot of 50% matching grants out there.
Mhm.
That's what it's 100%.
It's a deal.
Andrew?
And, yeah,
I mean, on that point, that being involved in strategic budgeting for nonprofits, it definitely move money around the short term. So the fact that they could front the money up front
oops, sorry.
doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't necessarily show viability. What 10% then does means it's the same thing. But
Mm.
I move money around.
Yeah. All right. So just to make decisions on this point, it sounds like the LPC generally, and we can all raise our hand in a second, 10% match for non-for-profit sponsors. So if you're all comfortable with 10% match, if you could just raise your hand so we have an understanding. Okay. All right. So that is for nonprofit. Last, public projects. Do we want to set a match minimum requirement for public projects?
Assuming that the public projects are really funded by the taxpayer a lot of ways you've already kicked in how much money on that as a taxpayer?
I'll increase it, so I'll increase it.
Thank you.
There's possibility that part of it anyway.
Mhm.
Try to come forward from a public entity, then there could be more than money that they would want to ask for or get.
Mhm.
I think they would.
Okay. Anyone thinking that maybe they should?
Let me see, so why is it no? Let's say what kind of project would we?
Right, so if anyone who redo the park, it's gonna cost $3 million. Right, more of the park down there, we definitely would consider the job. What about Akron? I shouldn't ask, but what about Akron?
I think they kept it at 0. Hold on, I'm gonna check my notes.
The question is, like, if anybody paid.
That makes sense.
I would.
Because your taxes will go up. It's really just.
Right, no, there's a.
They actually said 5% for public, if my notes are correct. That was the mayor's suggestion.
They mean
actually.
business. See, their mayor didn't recuse themselves. They didn't recuse themselves. I mean,
Sure, public. See.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
all right. So,
And we could turn them down if they're.
You can.
yeah, you can, Donna.
No, I can do that.
Oh, yeah, there you go. All right. So with that, it generally sounds like the LPC wants to move forward with no match for public projects. If you agree with that, if you can all raise your hand if you agree for no match. Okay. All right. So just to summarize, we're keeping it at 25% match for private projects. We are adding a 10% match for nonprofit, and there will be no match for public projects. Okay. All right. So we're going to move on now to the evaluation criteria, and this is what Susan was alluding to before. These items that we're going to be talking to you about is going to be referenced here on out when it comes to evaluating projects. They're for you to consider when deciding whether a project should continue through the process and ultimately be a part of that slate of projects that gets put forward to the state for funding consideration. We are going to remind you of these criteria at each meeting. And so in regard to the actual evaluation process itself, as you could see here, we're at the June meeting, LPC meeting number 2, and this is where you're all going to determine the evaluation criteria to be used to refine the project list. At LPC meeting 3 in August, that's when we're going to present to you all the projects that were received through the open call. And we're going to assist you all with determining the following for those projects: the eligibility, the project readiness, and then also maybe if we have to refine the project list at that point. At LPC meeting 4 in September, we will then present the projects again with additional information, either updates, detailed budgets, whatever information we're getting from the project sponsors between those 2 meetings. And the LPC, you all will be using the evaluation criteria to continue refining the list. And then at LPC meeting 5 and/or 6, again, depending if we need that 6th meeting, you're going to be using the criteria yet again to determine that final slate of projects that's going to move to the state for funding consideration. So you're going to be using this quite often. What does it look like? Here's a list of project evaluation criteria. We're going to dive into detail for each of these on the next slides. But generally, it's that the state and local goals, so being aligned with the state goals, but then also the local goals for the New York Forward, but also for the region. Project readiness. The project should be well developed and poised to proceed in the near term in a way that will jumpstart the redevelopment of that New York Forward area. The catalytic effect. The project is likely to have a significant positive impact on the revitalization of the downtown by attracting other investment at a scale that is appropriate for the community. Co-benefits. The project will result in benefits to the community and the project developer, such as generating additional economic activity and improving quality of life. And again, I go back to the example from Montgomery, that multifamily development. They're developing their project, but they're also doing that streetscaping. So they're improving the streetscape for the pedestrian in the community. And cost effectiveness. The New York Forward investment in a project would represent an effective and efficient use of public resources. So to dive into this, these are the New York State goals. Not going to read them because it's a long list, but generally, New York State goals are that the state wants to create active downtowns with a strong sense of place, attract new businesses and a diverse mix of shopping and entertainment and service options, enhance public spaces for arts and culture, build a diverse population with residents and workers, grow the local property tax base, provide amenities for now those new residents and workers in the downtown, and then reduce greenhouse gas emissions and support investments that are for a resilient future. Those were the state goals. We now have the REDC goals. So those are the region goals. And for the region, the REDC is looking for strong foundations for economic growth by investing in infrastructure, transportation, and housing, revitalize downtowns and community centers through adaptive reuse, attract new companies and support the growth of existing businesses, attract and retain people, providing them with affordable access to education, training, and wraparound services, and preserve and create outdoor spaces. So we have state goals to conform with, we have our regional goals, and then of course we're going to have our New York Forward goals as well. So these are the goals that Lizzie read through with you all before, and they speak to diversifying the downtown's commercial offerings, enhancing the pedestrian experience, enlivening the downtown through creating a sense of place, and increasing housing opportunities. So these are the general bucket of the goals that we want our projects to be conforming with.
And I just want to note, there will not be a project that meets every single goal.
Yes.
That is not the expectation. These are generally like guidelines for the types of projects we want to see.
Yeah, that's a good point. So then we have project readiness. So projects should be well developed and poised to proceed in the near term in a way that's going to jumpstart the redevelopment of the New York Forward area. So things to consider: is the project scope clearly defined, or is it just an idea? And an idea means that, okay, I think I want to maybe redevelop this property with a mixed use development, but they don't have anything beyond that. So that's just an idea, and that means they're going to need a lot of work to get to the point of having a cost estimate prepared or having a clearly defined scope so that you have something to actually evaluate per se. So they still have things to figure out. Does the project sponsor have the capacity to implement and maintain the project and manage a state contract So that's important, and that talks to what you were talking about earlier, Donna, with your question. So is the project sponsor able to continue this process while working with the state agency, fulfilling their requirements, and going through the contract process? Can this project begin implementation in the near term? Does the project sponsor have other funding available for this project? So that kind of talks to what we were talking about before. Can the project proceed without any significant regulatory hurdles? And does the sponsor have site control? So these are all important things just to be considering and thinking about when we should first show you all those projects at the next LPC meeting.
Quick question, if someone has this amazing idea that we never
Mhm.
possibly could have conceived of before it was put in front of us,
Mhm.
but it's kind of sketchy. But they do meet the rest of the criteria,
Mhm.
right? So it really is just like this great, unbelievable plan, but they have everything else, sort of with the potential for everything else to be in line.
Mhm.
Would you then go back to them and say, hey, the LPC thinks this is a great idea, but you were so far away, and here's the checklist of the things that you need to bring next time? Would you like take on the active coaching of that project?
Yeah. So from the moment that projects are submitted through the call for projects and the call for projects closes, the project team takes the first pass through of all the projects. We're going to make sure that they have all the information first that the form requests of them. And then we're going to really do the first look through to make sure, is it just even eligible? And then from there, we're going to create what we like to call an information needs list. So what's outstanding that we need to better understand your project? So we're going to come up with all of that, and we're going to be in constant communication with the project sponsors from the moment that they submit to the moment if their project is put on that slate. So we're going to be in constant communication with them. And again, we're going to take back all of your questions, comments, feedback, everything to the sponsors.
So that amazing but sketchy project. Us prove that they have funding for it. Right? Like
If
it's
that,
not
yeah.
necessarily private funding, but something say like they don't.
So that's when we're going to request from them. So if they in their form indicate that they're anticipating receiving a loan from the bank, we would like a letter from that bank indicating that they already have a relationship with that bank and that it's not just like Joe Schmo is writing this letter for you. We want concrete evidence that you will be receiving this bank and that you are in good financial standings.
I would say for these amazing ideas that are a little sketchy, I've definitely seen them. Usually the biggest hurdle is honestly site control. Is like, oh, we have this great idea. There's a property that's for sale. We want to do this. We can figure it out. And they don't have site control. And that's a process to get that.
Yeah.
And this program does not pay for property acquisition. So they have to find totally separate funds to do that. That's usually one of the biggest issues with those amazing ideas.
And
We saw, sorry.
no, go ahead, please.
We saw a lot of projects that people didn't have site control or it was like city property. But
Yeah.
the city wasn't the applicant. So then consultants went back to the city and said, do you want to do this project? Because
Right.
we do that project happen and sometimes it gets right because it's like, no, we don't want that project to happen. But ultimately it was because it was the city on site. That's what we saw.
Yeah, and then even to that too, we've also seen where for one round, we saw 2 different applicants come in for the same building that was up for sale. They had 2 different uses. They learned through this process. They both did not own the property or were even leasing it at that point in time. So they kind of came together into one project and they moved forward that way. So we have seen in some cases where project sponsors end up linking up, or especially if like a project sponsor is putting forward a commercial storefront but don't have a tenant, and we see the museum come in. The museum now has a location to go into. So we have seen those kind of organically happen throughout the process also.
Paid it off and then have the person basically destroy what they did or anything, or is there any clawback or anything?
So Homes and Community Renewal and ESD, they usually contract with the private and nonprofit projects, and they do have in their contracts a 5-year clawback period for if the building is sold or not, for its intended use. Those are obviously project by project discussions for, if that does happen with the project.
You could do like a soft loan, table loan. Just in the contract.
It's just in their contract that they're subject to a recoupment of funds.
I think that's a great idea, because you could give all this money for this private thing, it can be great, and then in 2 years, they sell it and becomes something other than.
Sometimes there's depreciation and stuff.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so let's continue on. So now catalytic effect. So the project is likely to have a significant positive impact on the revitalization of the downtown. And so things to consider, will this project significantly enhance downtown Dobbs Ferry? Will this project have long-term beneficial impacts? And does this project have the potential to attract other investment or create the benefit beyond the New York Forward boundary? So something to think about in regards to catalytic effect. Next, we have co-benefit. So for co-benefits, the project will, so when considering co-benefits, the project will result in benefits to both the community and the project sponsor, such as generating additional economic activity while also improving the quality of life. Co-benefits from projects result in that secondary benefit to the community. So the question for you all, are there co-benefits that should be prioritized when evaluating projects? So we have seen in the past, these are some examples, the potential to attract regional visitors, increasing accessibility and affordability, enhancing the community connectivity and cohesion, or even generating new jobs and employment opportunities. So we have seen some of these actually be used in previous communities. And so the question to you all is, do we want to define specific co-benefits? Again, the project does not need to meet every single co-benefit, but generally should be kind of consistent with one or two of them. Or we just keep it broad and we just keep it to, is it producing a benefit to the sponsor and the community as a whole?
How is this presented then? Like, we have those 4 bullets that are the goal. Is this separate now project evaluation criteria is another?
So, yes, kind of. So ideally, so the criteria is really mostly for you all in evaluating the projects, but this is all public information. So project sponsors can be tailoring their projects to be meeting and really putting their best foot forward to meet all the criteria evaluation so that when you're reviewing it, it's evident there. So if they see that these co-benefits are listed out as X, Y, and Z, ideally then they're trying to tailor their projects to conform with those.
If we don't list those, does that undermine the transparency of this process? Do you feel? Have other places who have received this grant leaned into that because they wanted to increase transparency?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we didn't really start defining co-benefits until a couple of years ago. I think we left it relatively broad. It is still a subjective thing, even if you define it in a lot of ways of what does potential to attract regional visitors mean? But I can speak particularly to the potential to attract regional visitors. This was one that actually Highland Falls did last year. I mean, they were really looking for their downtown to bring in some of those people that were going to West Point and then just leaving town. And so that was something that they really wanted to, prioritize and make clear. So they really put that, how do we get those regional visitors coming into our downtown? I'm going to go back to Nyack because I know I've been referencing them. One of the things that they added, they wanted to really think about preserving the historic identity of the community. So what are projects that are going to help do that, or what other elements that can make? I mean, Joe, one thing you said is well, facades are really important. Is that, a co-benefit if it helps, create an attractive, private street wall? I would say that could be one thing I would note is the state is not going to get into the regulation of that. That's not what we do outside of maybe the Historic Preservation Office. Right. So that goes back to the villages, design standards and so forth. So that may not be a good one, but that's maybe if that was a priority of the entire committee, that's one thing they could.
But it doesn't necessarily, we could all have different priorities.
Yeah, right.
And when these present, we don't necessarily we won't all vote on the same way.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and that's the purpose really of.
So that's an well, yes.
Well, and so moving forward, that's the purpose of this evaluation criteria. We have done it in the past where we create worksheets with every line item for each of these criteria, and we produce one for each project, and we do it that way. We won't be voting on projects, nor do we rank or prioritize projects. So those are keywords that we're not going to use in this process. And so we want to look at the projects as a whole. And that's why we have this criteria. So we are vetting the projects based off of the criteria and how they fit with the criteria. Because then also at the end of the process, when we have that slate of projects, you are voting, yes, I want to move the slate forward, or no, I do not. You're not voting for individual projects at that point in time.
But I think part of what we can be considering in this co-benefit is what all of the research has shown from the people at the workshops, the work that we've done, and sort of what the goals are of the residents and all of the consultants who analyze this. And so if, like it's been looking at the meeting of visitors, if that is the problem that they're trying to solve, and everybody agrees that that's a big priority, then that's why there would be that. So it's not like it's just what we read on the law.
Right.
About what might be pulled from all of the work that's been done.
Right.
That's
All
what
that, and I don't know. Well, I mean, like, one thing that's a big part of the application that we propose and the specific boundary is the connectivity to Metro North and how it can like bring people up or like connect it. So I don't know. It's like thinking of that as one of these things that could be criteria put in.
Yeah.
I just can't like rapidly be on that.
I mean, that does, I mean, the connectivity between Metro North and regional visitors, like a station jobs. RC has their events, Masters has their events, they want to come here downtown. You know, we increase that walkability. If we increase walkability from those sites here. So I guess all of the above right there.
I think that it's not all of those.
Yeah, it does.
Maybe not generate. Maybe not. As much fun as it's from, and maybe there will be as well. Or maybe the retail. Right.
And again, so the idea is that the project does not need to hit every single one of these, or even honestly, doesn't even need to hit one. It's more so that it's still providing the benefit between the two. It's just these are some that we kind of want to prioritize in a sense. So if a project does hit it, I mean, that might look better for the project. But again, it doesn't have to hit every single one. So we could keep these 4 bullets while also just looking at the project in its whole for, is it providing the benefit to the community and the project sponsor, while then looking at the bullets to follow, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Or you could just go with, it results in secondary benefits to the community, and you all can discuss what those specific co-benefits are when discussing the projects. Yeah.
I like that myself.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
I don't know all the work. I don't know all the work about it. I've been keeping it wrong.
Go ahead, Steve.
No, I'm just saying, I actually don't understand the co-benefits. I think we're evaluating the project with all these other criteria. It's of course, it needs to be of interest to the sponsors.
Right.
And then it's providing benefits. You know, so I mean, it's like, and the benefits are all those other criteria. No, I'm a little lost, but anyway.
Yeah, I think that, probably co-benefits is more thinking about like private projects in general of just like, so it's not just benefiting that private developer, it is providing a larger benefit to the community. Right.
Yeah.
What you're doing the project is really big benefit anyway.
Yeah. Right.
Present the co-benefit in their sales pitch.
If they're good at it.
Ideally, they should.
You would hope so. All right, so it's kind of sounding like we want to keep it broad, and then we could talk about the benefits of the project when the time comes. So we're going to keep it broad, and that's just going to be the fact that the project results in that secondary benefit to the community, rather than having them listed out.
But keeping it broad, I think that we're saying.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. We're all good with that? Okay. All right. So just to continue on, because I know we're getting close to time, these are the last 2 criteria to consider. So this is cost effectiveness, and this is what Susan was talking about earlier when we were talking about the matching and leverage. So the New York Forward investment in the project would represent an effective and efficient use of public resources? Is there a demonstrated need for New York Forward funds? Did the sponsor provide adequate budget information? Does the project have the potential to leverage other private or non-state investments? And is the sponsor providing matching funds? So we now know the answer to the last, which about the matching funds for private and non-for-profit. So then these are the other things to consider. So as we mentioned before, with the budget table, we will be asking for backup information to understand how do they get to these cost estimates. We're going to be asking for if they do want to, if they do indicate that they'll be getting a loan, we're going to request information pertaining to that, pro formas for those larger developments. So things to be considering in regards to that. Any thoughts or questions on this? And it'll come more organically too when we start actually seeing the projects in front of us. You're going to be able to answer these once you have the project in front of you. All right. So then lastly, public support. So the project is supported by the public and the public understands the benefits of the project. So does the public support the project? Does the public understand the project and its proposed benefits? And is the New York Forward funding request consistent with public priorities? So we will be having public workshop number 2 in the fall, which we'll talk about in a second. And at that point in time, that's when we're going to be presenting all of the projects on the slate of projects at that point in time. And at that time, that's going to be an opportunity for the public to provide feedback and weigh in on all of the projects. And the idea then is to share that information with the sponsors directly and for the sponsors to consider that feedback and see whether or not they should be tweaking their project or whatever it might be. But even before then, through all of our conversations, you all also are the public and you're acting on behalf of the public. So it's for them to be taking into consideration all of your feedback and input as well. Pretty straightforward with this one. All right. Any questions in regards to any of that? Again, the criteria you're going to be seeing throughout the rest of our meetings over and over and over again. Okay. I'm just going to wrap it up. Okay. Sorry. So next is the open call for projects. For the open call for projects, just a brief reminder that the open call for projects is open. It opened in early June, right after that public workshop 1, and it's going to close on July 31st. For folks that are interested in either just looking at the form or actually filling out the form, it is linked on the Dobbs Ferry New York Forward website, so the project website. And we, as I mentioned before, we're going to have some virtual office hours, one on the 21st and I think one on the 10th. Oh, yeah, it's right there. One on the 10th and one on the 21st. So we're going to be having those. The links to the Zoom are on our website, so folks can join. You're all more than welcome to sit in and listen to those conversations as well. And then, as I mentioned before, the open call information is going to be updated after we all flesh out the vision and the goals. So then, and also the local evaluation criteria, so the co-benefits. After that is all finalized, then that's going to be updated on the project form as well as our website. So then prospective sponsors are up to date with what the vision, the goals, and those co-benefits are. Any questions on that? Pretty straightforward and just mostly a reminder. Okay, upcoming meeting. So here are our upcoming meetings. You could see we had LPC meeting 1. We're at LPC meeting 2 currently. We do have LPC meeting 3 scheduled for August 21st, in which we'll be presenting the key findings and the takeaways from the downtown profile and assessment. We're going to be talking again about project criteria, and then we will also be going through the projects at that point in time. Between meetings 3 and 4, we'd like to put a hold on all of your calendars for September 4th at 6:15 p.m. for a virtual working session. This is just a hold for now. We're going to know at LPC meeting 3 whether or not this working session is going to be needed. And the purpose of the working session is to allow for you all and the project team to sit more in an intimate setting, to talk through the projects more in depth, and to come up with a list of questions and input that you have for the sponsors that we will then take directly and bring it over to the sponsors and talk it through with them. So for now, it's just a hold, and that is September 4th at 6:15 p.m. and we'll send out a calendar hold for you.
And just note, like, no decisions will be made at that virtual working session. All decisions are made in public LPC meetings, but like Christy said, it's just a time to dive into a little bit more of the details of the project. Because at LPC meeting 3, we're going to be, depending on how many projects, like, it's not going to be a time to discuss a lot. Yeah.
That's just for LPC, everything.
Exactly.
Exactly. And we will plan, so prior to LPC meeting 3, all of the project materials that we receive, we are going to put it all into one folder essentially and send it to you so that you will all have the materials to review as well.
Except for any confidential financial information. That will only be to the project team.
There you go. So you will have all of that to review at your leisure prior to LPC meeting 3, but at LPC meeting 3, we're going to be providing high level an overview of each of those projects. So then following that working session, meeting 4 is scheduled for September 17th, where we're going to continue to refine the project list using the evaluation criteria, and we're going to prepare for the public workshop. Then we have meeting number 5. So for meeting number 5, you could see here, it was previously scheduled for October 15th. And at that meeting, we plan to review the feedback from the public workshop, review the project list, and potentially vote on the projects if we feel comfortable to. However, we would like to know from you all if we can move that meeting from October 15th to October 23rd, and that is to allow adequate time for the project sponsors to take in any feedback from the public workshop, which the magic date is October 6th. So we are hoping to provide them adequate time to take all the feedback and anything that they might receive at the public workshop into consideration before that final vote potentially on that meeting at LPC meeting 5. So October 23rd, 6:15 p.m. rather than the 15th. Does that work for everyone, or at least most folks? Yep. So great. Okay. So we were going to send the revised calendar hold, so you'll have that reflected on your calendars as well. Following, so if we determine at LPC meeting 5, we're not ready to vote yet, there's still some things that need to be tweaked, or maybe the slate still needs to be refined, we will then have meeting 6, October 29th. Again, that's to review that final project list and then vote on that final slate of projects. So that one is still tentative until we really know where we're at with the list of projects. All right. So then public workshops and outreach. So as previously mentioned, we have completed our first round of public engagement events. And now we're really looking towards the fall for the public engagement and our one public engagement event and our public workshop. We are finally planning to go to Ferry Festa on October 4th. We hear it's fun and we want to be a part of it. So we are going to be there. And the plan would be that we will set up a table with an interactive activity, and we're going to present the slate of projects at that point to the public and ask for real quick feedback, just because we understand like it's a street fair. We don't want people lingering. We're going to make it quick and fun, and that's going to be one way to get feedback. And then following that following Monday, October 6th, we're going to have our second public workshop. And at that time, again, we're going to provide the public with just an update. What have we been doing for the past however many months since public workshop number 1, and then also give them an opportunity to actually weigh in and provide feedback on the slated projects at that time. So those are the 3 dates. One date is October, or 4 dates actually. If we go back, September 4th for the working session, again, just tentatively, October 23rd for meeting number 5. The public engagement event is at Ferry Fest on October 4th, and then the public workshop on October 6th. We'll send you calendar invites for these events, just so you have them on your calendar. Any thoughts or questions? We are at the end. There was a lot of information. We are at 8:15, but I also do want to let, well, Seth, you're only our member of the public who's held on. If you have any questions before that, any LPC members have any questions, thoughts?
I just want to note one thing on the public comment. We did have somebody here who had a comment on the High Street Park. She was not able to stay through the meeting, but she did send a letter that I will send to all of you as well, just kind of an idea about a project on a public site.
For the meetings that are slated to come up and reviewing, are the people who submit them at those meetings, or they can be, or do we just talk about them to you, like, what's that?
So for the LPC meetings, it is open to the public, so sponsors are more than welcome to come and sit in and listen to listen to the conversations that we're having. They also then can speak during the public comment period, just as a regular public member, and they could answer really any questions at that point in time that maybe we had posed during our conversations about the project. We have seen that they'll come up and just respond to those during that time. We can also determine, we could see how we feel in regards to having the project sponsors actually present on behalf of their projects. We have done that in some communities. We're at LPC meeting 4, rather than hearing from the project team summarizing and giving you more information about the projects, hearing directly from project sponsors. So that is something that we could consider too at LPC meeting 3 once we see the projects come in. So that's also an opportunity for them to do so. But otherwise, they're definitely more than welcome to be here, listen into the conversations and everything.
So at 3, that's when we see what they want, like the next meeting, we see all the projects, paperwork form, we can discuss it here.
Mhm.
And we decide we want them to.
Present.
Next.
That would be then LPC meeting 4. Yes.
I really appreciated the presentation that we had, like, I felt like they were able to answer some questions.
Mhm.
I liked that idea because otherwise we didn't necessarily always have that opportunity.
Yeah.
How many, projects would you expect to be advanced?
It's such a hard question. Last year in Montgomery, we received
9?
I was gonna say like 12,
Maybe
but that the list did dwindle, but then in Highland Falls,
we got like
17 or 20.
Have you got any yet?
No projects have come in yet, no. But we did have, as I mentioned before, at the call for projects office hours, we did have a few private sponsors come in and talk with us and with interest of submitting. So there are people out there that are considering it, which is great, but we have no real indication at this point. All right, so with that, we'll open up to the public. And by public, Seth, do you have any questions or comments? All right, so then, no, nope, we just, that's true, no one online. So with that, we will then head to the next steps and important dates. So LPC members, for you all to promote the open call for projects and review the New York Forward Guidebook. As Lizzie mentioned before, the slides in regards to project development and criteria have the guidebook section, so you can always flip back and forth if you want to do some homework on that. For us, we're going to be working on that the downtown profile and assessment. We're going to be hosting those virtual office hours for the call for projects, and then we're going to be compiling project information as it comes in, which is exciting. Yeah. Mhm.
I'm working with somebody on a public project that doesn't benefit me directly. Do I have to recuse myself?
And yeah, I mean, I think we get this question a lot, like, do mayors or trustees have to recuse themselves for public projects? No, because they're in the public realm.
Yeah.
And then just lastly, important dates. Everyone should be aware of this date as of now, July 31st, the call for projects ends, 5 p.m. Get your submission in. And then our next meeting is going to be August 21st. So you'll have July off of meetings, but you will be getting the project information, actually in August. So you're really off for July. And then we will resume in August again when we send you the project information for your review. And then when we have that meeting in the end of August. So if you have any questions or anything, you know how to contact us. We will be sending you all the vision and the goals for your review. And if you have any edits or revisions, definitely get those over to us. But for now, that is it. And we appreciate your time.